welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green. And with me today, I am joined by the author of the Inquisitors Guild series, Dave Dobson. Dave, you are the first other person called Dave to be on this show.
Well, I'm honored. There are a lot of people my generation called Dave. I remember when I was in college, people would say, "Hey, Dave," and about five of us would turn around. But I don't know how common that is over there, but it's definitely.
Definitely when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s there was, but not so many Davids or Daves around these days. My brother's called Daniel, and I don't know anyone else called Daniel either anymore. Like it's a name that's kind of disappeared.
My brother's Daniel also.
Well, is he your older brother by any chance?
Younger.
Oh, well, that's where we diverge.
The timeline split.
Yeah. How strange. So how are you doing? Where is it you're talking from?
I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I've lived for 25 years. I came down here for a teaching job. I taught at Guilford College here in the geology department for many years.
Oh, awesome, brilliant stuff. And it's obviously the start of February. So what I know here where I am in Ireland, it's very, very cold and wet and grey most of the time. How is it for you?
North Carolina, it's famous for being different in every couple hours, but right now it's about the same as there. Grey and cold has been for a few days, but it could be 70 or 80. I guess that would be 35 soon. I don't know, can't do Celsius in my head.
I would not like that at all. We never get that high, thankfully. Yeah. Well, once or twice, but it's like the apocalypse.
35 is too high. I should say 25 to 28 maybe this time of year.
Yeah, that's pretty much our summer on a good day.
Yeah.
It got to once or twice it got to about 34, 35 here, and it was like the apocalypse.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. People were just, everything was cancelled because everyone was like, it's too hot to do anything, don't go into work, don't do this. We're just not built for it. The country isn't built for it. We're not all built for it. But the weather as it is at the moment, cold and grey, that is the perfect weather for reading and writing books, I think. And obviously you're a writer, that's why you're on here and talk to me. So how did you get into writing? Was it a dream that you always had, or was it something you kind of stumbled into?
I'd like to say it's a dream I always had. It's certainly something that I always did, or not always, but every few years I would be like, I'm going to start, my big novel and try that. And I started, 10 or 15 of those big novels at different times. But eventually I got to the point where I worked on the same one for a long time. And that was when my kids were small and we were on a summer vacation. We often drove up to my wife's family's house in Massachusetts, which is about 14 hours in the car. And so I'd take my laptop and work. And so for a couple summers running, I did that. And then I would keep working while we were up visiting. And that book turned into the first book in the Inquisitors Guild up there, Flames Over Frosthelm. But that took about 14 years between when I started it and when I finally put it out for people to read. So, and then since then, I've written quite a few more. That was 2019. I put that out, and then I've got 4 books out now, 2 more finished and ready to put forth. So yeah, I kind of got more into it in the last 2 or 3 years. My kids left home and went off to start living their lives, and so I had more time. And then my teaching job sort of fell apart. So I thought, hey, I could give this a try and see what it's like to do this. So
yeah, and it's funny I speak to a lot of other writers, and it's funny how circumstances always come into play. Because I think a lot of people do have that idea of, I would love to do this, but I don't just have the time, or my circumstances are right. And a lot of people have something where something not ideal happens in their life, like loss of a job or something like that, and it gives them that impetus to go, you know what, I'm gonna try this. Yeah, and it's funny as well. The first book, it takes so long, but once you get that first one done, it's a lot. It does become easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And I've gotten to the point now, actually, so Flames Over Frosttown was 14 years. Sometime in the middle of that, once I was done with the draft and letting people read it, I actually started the second one, Outcast Crown, and wrote maybe 4 or 5 chapters, 20,000 words. And then I let that go for a long time too. And then this Daros one I started maybe 4 years ago and wrote the first 4 or 5 chapters and then stopped. So, but now I'm to the point where I have mined out all of those previous things that I've started and coming up with new things. So yeah, that's been a shift where I start with a concept and work it all the way through and finish it. So I think I don't know if I'm maturing or at least getting less dysfunctional as a as a writer, but that's been part of it too.
What is your kind of inspiration? Like, where did you what kind of things did you like to read before you became a writer?
So I have always read fantasy and science fiction. So you know, I was, as a kid, we would go to the library. My mom was a professional librarian, and we would go to the library every week or week and a half. And I would always go to the fairy tale section. They had Andrew Lang. I don't know if you know him. He was a Scottish guy who wrote or compiled a whole bunch of fairy tales. And my library had, you know, 10, 11 volumes. They were all thick as anything. And
Right.
so I really loved those. And they were all, you know, stories in typical old school fairy tales. Might be closer to what you write with the horror stuff. There was, you know, monsters and kids getting their heads cut off and all this kind of stuff, you know. But yeah, those were exciting. And then I moved on to science fiction and then the fantasy of the day there. So that's where I got started. And then I was just about the right age for Dungeons and Dragons, and so that got to be a big part of my childhood. And that's kind of group storytelling, and so that fit a lot of what I like to do.
That was like, was it Salvador in particular? Was he one of the big ones from that, or?
He wrote many of the books. I didn't read a lot of his stuff. I've read a few of his books, but no, that was just more of the inspiration to getting into writing and creative storytelling. What I read at that time was probably more classic stuff. I read a lot of Robert E. Howard, Elsepregna Camp, the Conan stories. I read the Barsoom stories, John Carter, that kind of stuff. And then I got into a lot of sci-fi to Tolkien then too. So that was my history there. As I got into my adulthood, I started reading more mysteries and thrillers. And so that's the kind of genre crossover that I got into as I started writing my set, which is kind of a mix between high fantasy and detective fiction, sort of, because that's the part. And then I loved William Goldman's Princess Bride, both the book and the movie. And so that's the sort of attitude that I've tried to have too, where the characters have good hearts and big quirks and like to have fun, and you know, there's a lot of banter and humor and back and forth that way too. So.
Yeah. It's funny. I did the same with the mystery thing as well, but with urban fantasy. So I went with I have a fantasy series which is just very fantasy, but I have the urban one where I was like, I'm going to put some mystery and thriller into this as well, because like just because I love the movies. I love like kind of, you know, the old 1940s and 50s kind of noir films and everything like that. So I was like, I'd love to do a fantasy version of that. And it's, you know, when you write, your imagination is the only limit, really.
Yeah. I've seen your covers. They totally evoke that noir kind of feel there too.
Yeah, we tried. There's a few different ones that we tried to get. We did a few different ones to try and get the right kind of thing for it, because we were like, don't want to go too far into this and too not close. God, we could talk about covers for ages to see. It's such an important aspect of it. So you have the Inquisitors Guild series, and you have the standalone Daros as well. Where did the idea come from for the Inquisitors Guild?
So yeah, it really came from, I'm very much there's this sort of pantser and plotter kind of divide, and I'm very far over on the pantser side. So I think that fits the mystery side of it, or the detective side of it, pretty well, because I am figuring out what goes on with the characters. And so mostly when I start one of these books, I just write and put them in situations and see what develops. And then I think, okay, how would they respond to this strange thing they've discovered? And so that's kind of the inspiration, is I'll just write a scene, and whatever interesting thing happens during that scene, I'll follow up. And because they're professional investigators, their job is to follow up. And so they follow their techniques and their training and go through it and see. And then I can add more things that they find, and the mystery gradually takes shape. And then at the end, I have to go back and make it all, make more sense than it did, kind of appearing out of whole cloth there. But so the inspiration is I really like the kind of buddy cop genre. So my characters always have partners that they're working with. And so I like that dynamic where you have two people sort of bouncing ideas off each other. So that was the frame of the first one, and it's carried through into the others. And then I liked the idea of having in a medieval sort of fantasy setting, an agency or a division of government. It's really kind of a branch of the military in the city where they are, that is devoted to solving crimes and fitting that into the whole sort of feudal system. Has been fun. So that's the sort of the idea behind that. Daros is similarly a mystery and kind of an action story too, but there's an invasion that starts, and then there are two parties that have to work their way through it. And that one, they have a little more of motivation. Well, one is just trying to survive the invasion. The other is a secret rebel inside the invading force who's trying to take it down. So that one, I played around with some different perspectives. That's the first one I wrote where I had chapters that were from different sides eventually coming together. So that was a fun experiment for me too.
And you wrote Daros when you had the first, was it the first, and it was the first Inquisitors Guild book out, and then it was Daros, and then you went back to the Inquisitors Guild? Was that the way that you worked on that?
Yeah, so I wrote Flames, the orange one, and then the purple one. While I was having the purple one edited, I wrote the blue one. And then I wrote Daros, and then I did Welling this last fall, along with a kind of thriller set in the modern world with a couple of sci-fi elements. So that's the next kind of thing. But I actually started Daros before I finished Outcast Ground, because I have this sort of scattershot approach to these things, and at least until I became or started calling myself a writer, as my main gig here, I would start things and then set them aside. But so yeah, there's a complicated ancestry there. But yeah, basically I wrote the first 3 of the Inquisitors Guild, then did Daros, and then came back to the Inquisitors Guild for another one.
Oh, it's nice to take a little bit of a break from the series, refresh and everything. So the Inquisitors Guild is it a 4-book series? Is that because the 4th book is that out now, or is it about to come out?
It's about to be. Yeah, it's going through editing now, but I think it'll be out next month. The way I've written them is it's a series, but it's not a single narrative. In other words, there's nothing that starts in the first book that you have to wait to the later book to pay off. So each of these, it's more like classic detective stuff, Agatha Christie or that kind of thing, where you might have characters that recur, but the mystery is different and self-contained in each book. So yeah, the Traders Unseen, the blue one, is actually a novella, so it's a little shorter. I have that one. I give that one out for free so people can maybe hopefully discover what I'm doing.
Sure.
But each of them actually has a different narrator, a different investigator within the Inquisitors Guild. And so you're following a different detective as they go along the path. Although in the second one, Outcast Crown, the narrator is actually the partner of the narrator in the first one, but he takes on an apprentice, and they go off and have a different adventure. So I didn't want to have the sort of John McClane Die Hard 2 problem where you're like, why is all this stuff happening to the same person again? So
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
that might be a way to.
No, yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's interesting to find. It's always interesting to see a character's point of view and then see what another person sees that character like,
Yeah.
interacts with them as well. You know, it's that's always a fun thing to do. So
Yeah.
the Inquisitors Guild, it can keep going for as long as you want.
As long as people are interested in it. These three go in sort of chronological order, and this one's set about 10 years earlier. It shows the sort of origin of one of the characters who's sort of a side character in some of the others, but it shows her back when she was just starting out. So it's fun. I can kind of jump around in the history of the city and explore different parts of that. So that's one of the neat things. It means that I don't have the kind of epic fantasy thing where you have to read books 1 through 6 to even know what happens in the final battle or whatever. But it does give me some flexibility, and I actually am more satisfied when a book is contained like that and has everything that you set up sort of pays off, and then you can read something else instead of having to dive into the next.
Exactly. Yeah. I get that. I get that completely. It can be tough to write once you get to the 6th or 7th book, and it's like, what did I write about this in the first book? The worst thing is like, why did I do this? Because now I have to do this. I can't change my mind, right?
If you're doing it book by book, you can go back to the beginning of the book and say this never should have happened and take it out. But if you've already published, then it's a lot harder to.
You're there in black and white. I mean, I suppose that's the thing though with the way publishing is now. You can always go back in and change it, but then if anyone has it before you've changed it, they'll be like, hang on a second, this was. But then Tolkien did that, so if he can do it, then anyone can do it. Because I don't know if you've seen that, but like the original version of The Hobbit before the Lord of the Rings came out is quite different in some bits, particularly around the ring and the nature of the ring. And and Gollum, the encounter of Gollum is very, very different. And I didn't know this for years. And then I read it somewhere, and I went and found like the passages, and I was like, wow, this is so. How annoyed would you be if you'd read this book and then it's completely different? But I suppose he was a trendsetter.
Yeah. Well, it's actually really easy now with the ebooks, because I can go in and I could take out the entire book and put in a different book, and it would still be listed there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the way it is. So what is next for you in 2022? So we have The World and Last that's coming out in March. What's happening the rest of the year?
So after that, I actually in NaNoWriMo, which is that writing month in November, I had just finished World and Last first draft, and I was sharing it with some people. And so I thought I would try something different. So I did this thriller set in the modern world, and I really liked the book. It was much more of a challenge than I thought to write in the present day, kind of constrained, because if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, you can always have anything happen and then you just have to explain it. But if you're writing in the modern world, cars only go so fast, and people are limited by actual technology and all that kind of thing. So so that one was a lot of fun, and I want to see how that goes. I'm either going to release it self-published like I've done these others, or I might try again to see if I can interest a traditional agent in that. I went through that route at the beginning, and it was soul crushing. But I think with the thriller, I might be in a little bit of a different situation with that. If it doesn't work, I'll give it a month or two and then try. But that book I'm excited to share to folks. And then I've been at the pace where I can do maybe 3 or 4 a year, and so for second half of the year, I'd probably do another Inquisitors Guild book. I've also been thinking of starting a different sort of fantasy world and playing around with something that's a little different. I don't know if I want to go full grimdark or anything like that. I don't usually enjoy that kind of stuff, but it might be nice to have something that's a little more scary. I know you do horror some, so I'd be
Thanks.
happy to
I've
have
been
any
known-
advice about how to pull that
yeah,
off.
I've been known to do horror. I've kind of retired from doing horror now.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's where I kind of got my start in terms of just getting into anthologies and stuff like that when I was just learning the writing thing of it. And so like my solo stuff, some of it is dark and everything, but most of it is fantasy. But I still keep getting stuff coming out in anthologies that is like horror stuff that I wrote 2 years ago.
oh
It's
wow,
like, oh yeah, this thing is coming out, and it's like let's go and promote this. And I was like, what? I'm like, what was your inspiration for this story? It's like, honestly, I don't remember. I
I
wrote
haven't
it in
had
2020.
that kind of history there coming back. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's right. Yeah, it's funny because you do a lot of the publishers will do like live events to launch them, so they'll have like the authors on to come in. And usually when I'm on, you can see that I'm like scrambling trying to remember anything about the story that I'm under because some of them I might have written, at the start of 2020 or something, and I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. No, but yeah.
Let the book speak for itself.
Yeah, it's what people want to get out of it. That's fine, right? Dave, thanks so much for coming onto the show. It's been
Well,
really.
thanks for having me. It's been great talking with you.
Where's the best places to find you on the internet?
There's davedobsonbooks.com is my website. I also am pretty active on Facebook. I'm starting to be more active on Twitter. GC Dave Dobson. My website has all the books and links and blog I try to do sometimes. And then the books are all on Amazon. And the Traders Unseen you can get for free a whole bunch of places. It's on Smashwords and Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing. So it's around and able to be found. But yeah, davedobsonbooks.com is a good starting place.
Excellent. So everyone who's watching on YouTube or listening to us on Apple Music or Spotify, all the links, will be in the show notes below where you can find Dave's information and Dave's books. And please go and check those out. There's a lot of choice that you can go for. Please check one or two of them out and say hello to Dave in the process. Dave, thanks again for coming on, and you'll have to come on to us again next time and tell us a little bit more about how everything's been going for you later on in the year.
That'd be great. I'd love to talk Ireland too sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Everyone who's watching and listening, thank you for staying with us till the end. Until next time.